love of everything Freddy, can there please be some kind of connection to Midnight Motorist in the new Click Team Racer game? That would be like the perfect connection.
Welcome back, fellow Freddy fans and other peoples of the internet. My name is James, and today, oh boy, we are covering the big one. Out of all the mysteries Five Nights at Freddy's has given us over the years, who dies first, what's in the box, what are the shadows, who is the Fredbear plush, what's up with the DCI? I think it's fair to say the biggest question mark left from the first 7 games was Midnight Motorist. It alone brings a huge list of questions, but before we go through them, we should probably do a quick recap of the game itself first. Because in order to solve Midnight Motorist, I believe we need to look at it with new eyes, without trying to fit it into our current understanding of the timeline, unless outside titles seem absolutely necessary to reference. What is it, on its own, trying to tell us? Midnight Motorist appeared in Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator as one of many playable minigames, but also as one of the 3 games required to get the Lore Keeper ending. Starting the game, it's a simple side-scroller where you avoid hitting other cars to bangin' music! However, on lap 4 there's a gap at the bottom of the screen that we must go through, bringing us to the real game. We drive through a semi-forested area in a purple car to our house, but along the way we can make 2 stops. The first is less obvious. We have to drive at a specific point off the side of the road to access a clearing. Empty except for one lone patch of dirt in the corner. We can't interact with it, there's no dialogue bubble, not even 3 dots. Without acknowledging it, we get back in the car and keep going. Here, we can access the second stop before home. Simply follow a different road to the side and we arrive at a location only labeled as Juniors. We park in the semi-full lot and try to enter, but are turned away by a green man. Come on, you know you can't be here. Don't make this more difficult than it has to be. So we leave and keep going until we finally get to our house. We enter to find somebody watching TV. Leave him alone tonight. He had a rough day. We ignore them, go up to the bedroom door and bang on it. I told you not to close your door. We start to walk away but get angry as we do. This is my house. He can't ignore me like that. And so we bang on the door harder. Open the door! Eventually, we decide to find a way in from outside, and so we walk around the house to find this person's window is broken, a set of small footprints leaving it, and a pair of 3-toed mascot footprints right by a clearing of bushes. The only response we have is that he ran off to that place again. He will be sorry when he gets back. And then the minigame ends. So, what happened? No, seriously, that's the thing with this minigame. Nothing happens. It's all the aftermath of something happening. At the very least, it was probably safe to assume that it was after the death of Charlie in the security puppet minigame. Due to the rain and purple car, we were probably Afton, but then we step out of the car and are yellow. What's the mound of dirt? What's Juniors? What is that place the runaway went to? Whose footprints are these? These are questions that for years people are still unsure how to answer. And so for a while now, whenever theory crafting and putting together timelines, this minigame just sort of became that one piece of the jigsaw puzzle nobody was sure how to fit in properly. And so we just kind of tape it on afterwards because it has to fit somewhere. And thus my conclusion, as well as many others out there about this minigame, was that this was not Afton, but actually a parent of the MCI. I cover this quite a bit in my Fredbear plush video, and I still defend it as something that works really nicely as a narrative, but with that explanation it does write off a few things like Juniors, the yellow guy, and the TV person is just kind of set dressing, while disregarding the rain and purple car as misdirection in what was supposed to be the FNAF game to wrap up all loose ends. But I was happy with it, so that's the narrative that went into my timeline, with hopes of never needing to cover this again. And then the 5 Laps at Freddy's demo released. During the big 10-year anniversary week, we got a plethora of new releases, teasers, and demos for the future games, books, and the second movie. One of those releases was a demo for an upcoming FNAF racer game, 5 Laps at Freddy's, or FLAF. To nobody's surprise, it was really a no-brainer. A racetrack completely devoted to Midnight Motorist was included, as well as the car being an optional vehicle to race, the car itself being titled the Midnight Motor. And on the car, there is a small detail that finally, after all of these years, tells us who the yellow guy is. On the car, there is an antenna with a yellow rabbit head on it. Yellow guy is purple guy, who is William Afton. Apparently in the game files, there is also a description that calls it a killer ride, and that it's the perfect choice for anyone wanting to flee a crime scene. But I don't even think that's really necessary for this. The yellow rabbit antenna is plenty evidence for me to believe that this is William Afton. As I said earlier, before the release of this demo, I had decided to say Yellow Guy is an MCI victim parent, mainly due to it just fitting nicely. But that's not the only reason. For me, it also gave the minigame a reason to exist, while with Afton being the driver, it just felt like it didn't. What is this minigame trying to tell us that we wouldn't have already known? Afton is a bad person, abusive with his family? Sure, the fourth closet would make that clearer a few months later, but I don't know if we needed a whole minigame to infer that. And I could not wrap my head around what the dirt pile or the footprints could be, especially with our current understanding of the timeline. But now that we know this is William, I think it's time we go back to December 2017 and look at this minigame within the context of that time period, and what the biggest debates were at the time. Coming off the heels of Sister Location and its DLC Custom Night, the community was left in a major state of confusion, and I mean more than usual. We had just been introduced to Circus Baby, possessed by the sister and daughter of Michael and William Afton respectively. The Bite of 83 versus 87 debates were still going strong even after the private room cameras and code to access said cameras. And probably the biggest thing, we got a cutscene of Mike literally turning purple, paired with another cutscene showing that Springtrap was still alive, while a speech by Michael is playing that strangely sounds robotic at the end. This, as crazy as it sounds, led many to believe that Mike was actually the purple guy that got Springlocked and possessed Springtrap, not William. With that, however, there was also a lot of just general confusion as to how we were supposed to fit Circus Baby's Pizza World into all of this. The timeline as a whole was rather muddled. Thankfully, a lot of debates were put to rest by Game Theory in this video, releasing November 5th, 2017, with Scott himself saying on Reddit, "I don't usually comment on theories or timelines, but I want to this time. This was a very satisfying and important episode of Game Theory. There have been some points of contention in the community lately, especially since Sister Location's Custom Night, that have caused members to leave, theorists to quit, and frustrated emails to be sent. Some of these issues were simply misunderstandings with the story, others were maybe just things I didn't leave enough clues about. They became things I felt I needed to answer with the new game. But now some things have been answered by MatPat. Obviously it's not 100%, but he really came through for this community, I think, during a time when everyone needed him. I won't go through this video point by point, but I will say this. For those of you who were really upset about the idea of Mike Trap, or upset about the idea of Purple Guy being literally purple, or hung up on 1983 versus 1987, watch MatPat's video and breathe a sigh of relief. Like I said, it's obviously not 100%, but he really hit this video out of the park. Scott confirms that William is still Springtrap and was never literally purple, while also settling the Bite of 83 versus 87 debate. But that's not what I really want to focus on here. I think the more interesting part of his statement is that those questions, as well as others, were things he felt he needed to answer in a new game. FNAF 6. A game that had been secretly in development since early that year, or at the very least since June when the Scrap Baby teaser released. Even if that Game Theory video never happened, FNAF 6 would have included things to try to lead us to the conclusions that MatPat provided and Scott confirmed. And I believe this is important to mention, because I don't think that Game Theory video would have changed any clarification that Scott was going to include in FNAF 6. A game that came out almost exactly 1 month after the post. And all of that brings us to the Lore Keeper minigames. Looking at them, what were things Scott would be wanting to clarify? For Security Puppet, it's explicitly showing that the child from Save Him does indeed go on to possess the puppet. This would clear up any debates about if Dave or the crime child was the one possessing it. Fruity Maze is less clear simply because of how straightforward it is. Perhaps it's simply confirming that William did wear the Yellow Rabbit suit during the MCI, as that was a topic of debate with Silver Eyes having William wear Fredbear for at least part of the MCI. It also gives William yellow dialogue. So then, what's Midnight Motorist trying to tell us? Well, firstly, it's showing that Purple Guy is not literally purple. As for why he's yellow now, I don't think it's because he's using his fake self or hasn't been corrupted or because it's a dark background. He was purple in Save Him, which is a very dark background, and he's also clearly abusive here, so he's not hiding his true self. I think the yellow was just meant to address him not being literally purple and because he wears a yellow costume. It could also be backing up that he is the Fredbear plush speaker later on. So, because we know that Yellow Guy is William, we can safely say that the person sitting in front of the TV is Mike, the other purple guy. They have similar gray text to Mike in FNAF 4, and he's watching TV just like we see him do in Sister Location. I'm sorry, but if we're saying that the yellow person is William due to a purple car, then the only person in this series who we saw watch TV in the last game is the same person watching TV in this game. Quickly, I do want to interject and just say I don't think we were meant to go into this minigame with mic traps solved. I think we were supposed to go into it unclear on the whole situation still. And I get Scott changing William due to this. But I think if we were still purple and went inside to see Mike watching TV, it would have gotten the same message across. But this is Scott trying to be as explicit as possible in his weird way. This is just double confirmation. Anyway, the second major thing this is meant to tell us is the death order of some of the major characters. But now we gotta identify the last character in this house, the runaway. We have Mike as the TV person, so this leaves the runaway to be Dave, the soon-to-be crying child. This gives us the death order, Charlie first, then Dave later during the Bite of 83. This minigame is the prelude or the potential cause of why Dave is so traumatized when we get to FNAF 4. There's a reason the house we see here is almost one-to-one with the main menu of FNAF 4. Whatever happens here is the catalyst of why he is so afraid. Also here is where the cracks start to occur when making this work with my timeline. Who do the footprints belong to? This is at the very least before the Bite of 83, so somebody like Golden Freddy is just out of the picture. But there is another bear here that fits, one that also has ghostly qualities and would only leave one set of footprints. Shadow Freddy. Now, I'll be honest, I've heard this from other people before, but I've never taken it too seriously because it always seems to just come out of left field. And I personally prefer Shadow Freddy to spawn in 1987, but looking at the evidence, I think we're being told he spawns here. Starting off with this game, we have the opening minigame effectively acting as a sequel to save him, with Freddy now feeding the kids pizza instead of cake. But after the second wave of kids, we have a dark reflection of Freddy appear, blocking us from serving pizza. A shadowy reflection of Freddy spawning at the same location of where Save Him is, the same night of Midnight Motorist. And the cool thing about this is, it would borderline confirm for me that Charlie does die at Fredbear's. In FNAF 2, Shadow Freddy is a dark copy of Golden Freddy, Fredbear himself, and the same thing goes for FNAF 4. William's wickedness, made of flesh, spawning at William's first direct murder, manifesting as a reflection of the bear that was also there. Notice how whenever Shadow Freddy does appear, it's directly, or at the very least, closely associated with something William has done. As to why it spawns outside of Dave's window, or where that place is, I honestly can't say at the moment. But it was there, potentially reaching out to William's kids. Wait, William... Where's Elizabeth? And this is where my timeline truly breaks. This minigame is, while touching on other stuff, ultimately about Afton and his kids, with Dave and Mike being accounted for. But Elizabeth is not here. And I think it's because she's buried in the clearing. Everybody grab your pitchforks, I am right there with you, because this completely goes against everything I thought I knew about circus babies. Heck, the timeline as a whole. Why would William be making animatronics to kidnap children and conduct remnant experiments so early in the timeline? That's paranormal stuff he shouldn't have a reason to know about. He just killed Charlie, and the Bite of 83 has not happened yet. Those are the two events that have always seemed to be the best moments for William to learn about possession, the thing that starts him down the path to try to learn how to create life, ultimately seeking a form of immortality. That is why for years I had written off the possibility that the mound was Elizabeth's grave, because it just didn't make sense. This doesn't even get into the fact that the house we see in the FNAF 4 minigames has to be after Midnight Motorist, but for some reason if Elizabeth is already dead, why does she have a room? Everything in my core tells me she dies later, but I cannot even begin to imagine what else could be in the dirt pile. This destroys what I thought to be the beginning of William's motivation and the Circus Baby timeline. If his inciting moment isn't Charlie's death or the Bite of 83, what else could it be? Now, for most theory videos, this would be the part where they reveal the big twist, the one thing that solves all of the problems they just posed. But to be completely honest, I don't know about this one. I do have a proposed narrative to try to make this work, but I want you to be aware that there is a serious chance, no matter how unsatisfying it is, that the simple answer may just be that there wasn't intended to be an inciting reason for William to start his journey. But if we're trying to give him one, the only thing I could think of is that the springlock failure William referenced in Silver Eyes that he survived also happened in the game's timeline. This would give him a brush with death, one that would make him pursue immortality. The narrative would go as follows. Fredbear's would be running by this point, and he creates Circus Baby's Pizza World to kidnap and experiment with kids, see what he can learn about the human soul, how it could potentially be manipulated. Elizabeth accidentally dies via Circus Baby because William is actually really bad at making things, and he closes Circus Baby's Pizza World on day 1, burying Elizabeth in the mound. Her disappearance causes the Afton family to break, with William moving out into the smaller house, and perhaps Mrs. Afton keeps the bigger one we see in FNAF 4 for a little bit. Something causes her to eventually leave the picture. Maybe she dies or maybe she simply leaves, but Dave and Mike have to live with William temporarily in the smaller house. William is at his lowest, continually embarrassed with his perfect image falling apart, and so he gets drunk at the local bar Junior's. Interjecting here, I don't think this is a Freddy's or Fredbear's. If everything else here is as explicit as I'm saying it is, purple car equals William, TV equals Mike, then this building would say what it was, or at least have a bear outside of it like in FNAF 4. I think it's called Junior's, so it's clear that it's not a pizzeria, because if it didn't have a label, then it would just be a plain building, leaving more to speculate about. Continuing on, William would get drunk and maybe cause a scene, so he's told to leave. He goes to Fredbear's, proceeds to kill Charlie, and then tries to go to Junior's again, but gets turned away because of earlier. Events would then play out as we see them in Midnight Motorist. Something involving Shadow Freddy causes Dave to be a crying mess, and the Aftons move into the larger home before FNAF 4. Where that place William refers to is, I'm honestly not entirely sure, but I don't think it matters too much for this narrative. Is this narrative messy, full of gaps, and a little unsatisfying? Yes. Things like William being spring-locked and Mrs. Afton being important to the story are things I hesitate and honestly dislike to use. Because while there's nothing necessarily against the idea, there's also very little to actually support the idea besides it can fit here. But with all of these pieces in order, is this what I think the rough narrative Scott was intending to tell us is? Very strongly, yes. I'll admit that I have not been a big fan of the idea the fun times were so early in the timeline, even before Freddy's in 1983. But recently a game was revealed that finally gave me the push to say, okay, I'll hear you out. And it's Secret of the Mimic. Based on the teaser, the game will probably be set in 1979, with animatronics that look like this. Jackie here aesthetically fits very nicely with the rest of the Funtime animatronics. And with the books, we've been shown in stories like The Mimic that development of these animatronics was going on a lot earlier than we generally tend to begin our timelines. There is a history here that we're not fully privy to yet. And I'm not saying we're going to get direct lore about William in this game, but I do think we'll get more context about this era that will help either confirm everything I've said here or debunk. Something like finding a prototype Funtime animatronic or a blueprint, maybe even the blueprints from Sister Location. And hey, this isn't the only thing coming out next year that may help confirm or debunk this theory. We still have the full release of 5 Laps at Freddy's to look forward to, if they iron out some of the bugs. The demo was fine, but come on. And I'm betting that there'll be more information about Midnight Motorist that was purposely omitted from the demo. So, did I solve Midnight Motorist? I wouldn't say so. I'm sure I'll be revisiting this minigame before the end of 2025, or at the very least in another timeline video. But I feel like for the first time we're genuinely close to actually understanding what this minigame was trying to tell us, even if its ramifications mean rewriting our timelines for the upteenth time. However, I'm satisfied for now. I do believe one day we will solve this minigame and truly understand the early parts of the FNAF timeline. With things like the week before and newer games being more explicit with its storytelling, I have a good feeling about that. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, please feel free to like the video and subscribe to the channel. I don't post too frequently, but whenever I do, I try to make sure it's something that's worth your time. I do have a Twitter I'll link down below, but I understand if you want to avoid that platform. Besides that, the best way to engage with me is in the comments. With that said, I'll see y'all there. Bye everybody.